It's Sunday, September 28th, 2025, and I'm tracking a few weather systems across the U.S., including two tropical systems just off the coast of Florida that look to cause some impacts for parts of the East Coast, monsoonal rains across parts of the Southwest, and a low pressure system that's just about to move into the Pacific Northwest. First, we'll start with the two tropical systems just off the coast of Florida, where we have Hurricane Humberto, which was a Category 5 yesterday, has now come down to a Category 4, and we have TD9, which is developing very quickly and will become Imelda as we head into the afternoon. So here's that forecast from the National Hurricane Center. You can see Humberto Category 4 right now with sustained winds about 150 miles per hour. That's going to be heading off to the northwest, but will eventually weaken as it turns around Bermuda. And then we also have Imelda, which will eventually become a tropical storm later today, potentially a Category 1 or even 2 hurricane as it moves off to the north, but the National Hurricane Center thinks it'll be under that, and then it will take a turn off to the east. And this is a more simplified version right here of the two systems. As we just remove the cones, it's a little less chaotic, but you can see by Tuesday, Imelda should make a turn off to the east, and then by Tuesday night, Humberto will also make that turn off to the east, but both systems still will produce some impacts for the East Coast. And as we look at the spaghetti plot models here, it pretty much reiterates the center of those tracks. Moving off to the east, there's still some members that try to take Imelda close to the East Coast and close to the Carolinas, but it looks like, for the most part, about 90% of the members now taking the storm off to the east, and that's why the National Hurricane Center's track has that turn and eventually the impact shifting eastward as well. However, as we head through this afternoon, Imelda is expected to actually become a tropical system, a tropical storm, and be named Imelda because we have such warm waters off of coastal Florida right now. In excess of 85-degree waters here, and that is why Imelda is expected to strengthen. All you need is 85 plus, and even in this location, we have waters as warm as 89, 90 degrees. So Imelda most likely will intensify quickly, but as it moves to the north, it will encounter that frontal system, will eventually stop its strengthening process, and then shift the storm off to the east. And this is the forecast strength here from a bunch of weather models. Notice how some of the models get it up to Category 2, while others keep it about tropical storm strength. In the middle is where most of the model members are, and it gets to about a weak Category 1 hurricane, so that's what we'll be looking at as we progress into Monday and Tuesday, just off the coast of Florida and South Carolina before it weakens and moves to the east. Meanwhile, we have Humberto, which will come down from Category 4 strength. There's one member that has it strengthened back up to a Category 5, but I don't think that's going to happen. And then it will continue to weaken as it gets closer to Bermuda, and then as it shifts east of Bermuda, coming down to about a Category 1. And this is the storm setup here. As you can see, both storms off the coast. Imelda will most likely be a hurricane at this point on Tuesday morning. So this is where we could see the highest impacts from the storms, and most likely being waves and coastal erosion, but certainly some heavy rainfall from the storms. But at least the latest track has definitely mitigated a lot of the severe impacts from what Imelda could have done to the coastal Carolina area, but there still will be some impacts even stretching into parts of Florida. And for Humberto, it will certainly be closer to making an impact for Bermuda. And you can see this right here as we push into Wednesday's forecast. Humberto basically scooting by Bermuda, but that will make a close pass to the island as we move into Thursday and Friday, but certainly have the high pressure over the Midwest and the cold front coming in out of New England, as well as the stationary front, to thank the redirection of Imelda, as it could have caused more substantial impacts to the coast. But regardless of the severity, we will track those impacts as Imelda works its way up the coastline here. And you can see those winds strengthening quite a bit as we push into Sunday evening right along the Florida coastline. And we'll see some gusts in excess of 25 to 30 miles per hour. And then those stronger winds will continue their way northward, getting into the forecast by Monday afternoon for a good portion of South Carolina, going into Georgia and coastal Florida. But notice how the winds really pick up north of the system. That is because of the pressure gradient from Humberto to the east. So you will see some stronger wind gusts even for parts of North Carolina, possibly tropical storm strength, and even going down the line here all the way into Florida, tropical storm force wind gusts are possible, even though the tropical storm sustained winds should remain offshore. So we will see some gustier winds, and I do think the peak of the storm system will be around noon on Tuesday for the Carolinas, and even going into northern parts of Florida, the coastline anyway, you will see some stronger wind gusts as well before the system starts to pull offshore. And zooming in here, you can see those stronger wind gusts right along the Florida coastline. This is going into Monday afternoon and Tuesday. Certainly by Tuesday midday, that's when we'll see the strongest winds right along the coastal Carolina area going into Georgia and northern Florida, where we could see an excess of tropical storm force wind gusts, which will be around 40 miles per hour to 50 miles per hour, but the strongest winds remaining just offshore, which is certainly good news compared to what we were dealing with just a few days ago. So here's a look at the wave heights from both systems. They will be churning up the waters as we head through the next few days. Humberto definitely churning up the waters a bit more, being a larger system, but Imelda, closer to the coast, will also produce waves of its own. We could see 10-foot plus waves from Florida stretching all the way up into the Outer Banks of North Carolina. And in fact, the Outer Banks may even see some 12-foot waves from the system. But in terms of beach erosion, I do think we will see that a little more substantial in northern Florida, just because we have the winds out of the northeast for a few days here. So that, in addition to Imelda being just offshore, churning up the waters, those large waves, we will see a little bit of beach erosion and potentially for parts of the Outer Banks, but not nearly as bad as what we dealt with Erin last month. So we will see some impacts from both systems here, and the waves will be churned up for several days, so there will be dangerous rip currents once the storms are gone as well. But at least the impacts are not expected to be quite as bad as what we were forecasting earlier in the week, because we were thinking Imelda would have just slammed right into South Carolina as a Category 1 hurricane, which that shoreline does not deal with coastal flooding very well, specifically Charleston. So this is certainly good news, keeping the worst of the storm impacts out to sea, but there still will be at least some minor impacts along the coastline. And one of the more significant risks from Imelda will certainly be the heavy rainfall, which is actually a combination of Imelda and that front we talked about earlier. So Imelda is going to throw that tropical rain at the front, and the front's going to try to stop it, but it does get squeezed out over parts of South Carolina here, and this will be a 2-day event, level 2 out of 4 risk for some flash flooding. And we go into Tuesday's forecast where that rain will still persist and eventually taper off as we go into Wednesday, but 2 days at level 2 out of 4 right along the coastline of South and North Carolina is where we think we could see some isolated pockets of flooding here. So as we take a look at future radar, you can see Imelda's rainfall and the frontal system's rainfall stay over parts of Florida going into Georgia and North and South Carolina. But specifically by Monday afternoon, you can see the heavy rain here going into parts of South Carolina and North Carolina. This is where we have that level 2 out of 4 risk. And even Humberto is going to try to throw some tropical moisture at this front as well. But at least the latest track taking the storms out to sea more than we thought definitely mitigates the flash flood risk, which could have been a lot higher if this track for Imelda was closer to the coastline. And you can really see this here with the rainfall forecast just off the coast of the Carolinas. Upwards of 12, even 15 inches of rain from Imelda just staying offshore this time. So that is certainly good news. But we will see some rainfall in excess of 3 inches potentially from parts of Florida all the way up into the Carolinas. And zooming in on parts of the Carolinas, you can see just how close that tropical rain is just offshore. There is potential to see upwards of 5 inches if this inch is even slightly off to the west, but I do think we'll see upwards of 3, even 4 inches of rain right along the immediate coast, and that tapers off even just 30 miles inland. So certainly good news, but definitely along coastal Carolina, watch out for potential of some localized flash flooding. And the other location that we'll see impacts from the storms here, both storms, will be Bermuda. Here goes Humberto passing by as we move into Wednesday's forecast. And then on Thursday and Friday, Imelda slides right behind it and actually could see some hurricane force winds from Imelda as it passes by. So here's Humberto once again going into Tuesday and Wednesday's forecast, potentially some tropical storm force winds and hurricane force gusts, and then potentially hurricane force winds from Imelda as it passes by Thursday into Friday. And of course, you'll have heavy rainfall mainly from Imelda, but upwards of 10 inches of rain expected here. But at least Bermuda is well fortified for these storms passing by, even with some substantial waves in the forecast as well. We'll take a look once again at the wave height forecast for Bermuda. Notice how Humberto brings upwards of 10, even 15-foot waves for the island, but Imelda, as it strengthens again and moves eastward, we could see upwards of 20 to even 25-foot waves just off the coast of Bermuda, possibly as high as 30. Good thing the island is well fortified, because it will be a situation where you could see some substantial wave heights from Imelda, and that could last for a few days here, but at least by the weekend, things should start to improve. Now we head over to the southwest, where there is a slow-moving low-pressure system, once again producing monsoonal rains. There was flash flooding in parts of Arizona just yesterday, and more is expected potentially today, a level 2 out of 4 risk for flash flooding. And that's also shifted to parts of New Mexico, where there is a level 2 out of 4 chance for flash flooding there as well. So we will see another opportunity of the monsoonal rains today. Tomorrow it does shift as we start to see a larger system in the northwest start to move in. So taking a look at the future forecast here, you can see that system coming in from the northwest, but also the scattered showers and storms through today and into tomorrow for parts of the southwest, eventually shifting into Colorado, New Mexico tomorrow. So we have a couple of opportunities here for some heavy rainfall, but specifically this afternoon is the higher risk. As we move into tomorrow, the risk does go down, but at least much needed rain enters the northwest, which will lower the fire risk as we head over the next few weeks here. And you can see the heavy rainfall across the region. Notice how much needed rain comes into the northwest, but we still will have those opportunities for heavy showers and storms for parts of Arizona and New Mexico. So we certainly have to watch out for flash flooding in those areas, but at least some much needed rain coming into the forecast for places like Washington, Oregon, and into Idaho. And we have a few things to watch as we head over the next several days here. We'll be tracking both Humberto and Imelda as they cause impacts to the East Coast, more flood potential from both those systems and also a system out on the West Coast, and a pattern change in the forecast that looks to keep things pretty warm as we move into the first few weeks of October. I'll have updates on all these things over the next several days.